Earlier this week, President Donald Trump announced a 200% tariff on the company. Donald Trump has declared economic war on a $124 billion company that may shift production to Mexico. Trump's threat to impose a 200% tariff on John Deere products threatens American farming, affecting jobs, food prices, and communities. The question is why John Deere is shifting production to Mexico, how farmers will cope with rising equipment costs, and if this is the beginning of a trade war. Stay tuned for more updates. What's taking place? Most people are unaware that a single threat has the power to upend an entire industry. Trump has never been hesitant to make headlines, but during a contentious campaign rally in Pennsylvania, his target is John Deere, a $124 billion cornerstone of American agriculture, rather than a foreign rival. If John Deere moves forward with his plan to move the production of skid steers and compact loaders to Ramos Arizpe, Mexico, Trump has issued a bold ultimatum. The company's U.S. imports will be subject to a 200% tariff. This announcement sent shockwaves through the political and economic landscape, in addition to generating conversation. In a vehement speech, Trump made it clear that jobs related to American manufacturing should remain in the country. He framed his position as a battle for American workers, denouncing businesses that put cost-cutting ahead of domestic loyalty. The workforce applauded loudly, but the ramifications of this action went far beyond political rhetoric. The fallout started almost instantly. Financial analysts began estimating the potential impact of the tariff on John Deere's earnings. The company's products might become unaffordable in the U.S. market with a 200% tariff, forcing them to either scrap their plans to relocate or risk losing a sizable percentage of their clientele. This action makes a strong statement to businesses and investors everywhere. America is retaliating against outsourcing. But why did John Deere initially take such a drastic measure? Deere's predicament. The decision to relocate production to Mexico was not made lightly by John Deere, a company that has long been a symbol of American ingenuity, with its green and yellow machines dotting farms across the heartland. But like many other manufacturing giants, Deere is feeling the pressure of growing operational costs in the U.S. In recent years, inflation and the need for more skilled workers have contributed to a rise in labor costs in the U.S. In order to remain relevant in a highly competitive global market, global competitors in nations with lower labor costs, such as China and Brazil, are producing agricultural equipment at a fraction of the cost. Maintaining competitive prices while covering these costs has become an uphill battle. The management of Deere felt obliged to move some operations to Mexico, where production costs are much lower. However, by putting itself closer to important international markets, Deere is also attempting to streamline its supply chain. The company wants to shorten shipping times and obtain an advantage in areas where there is a sharp increase in demand for agricultural equipment. But this business plan directly conflicts with Trump and his supporters' political views in the U.S. It appears to be another instance of a corporation putting foreign interests ahead of its national duty. This illustrates how much even the most American businesses are impacted by global economics. But the ramifications of this choice extend well beyond business profits. What occurs in Dubuque, Iowa, when a whole community abruptly loses its economic pillar? There was shock and anxiety when John Deere announced that it would be losing production jobs. For many families, working at John Deere is more than just a job. It's a generational legacy. Fathers and mothers have watched their children follow in their footsteps, establishing careers and lives around the factory's stable employment. Now, that stability is in jeopardy. Workers are unsure of their futures and wonder if they will be laid off or transferred to other roles within the company. Small businesses that depend on the workers at the factory are already experiencing a decline in foot traffic as customers brace for a decline in revenue. The psychological toll is also significant, with many employees feeling deceived by a company they thought was deeply committed to their hometown. Local leaders have rushed to provide support, but resources are limited, and some residents have started lobbying state representatives to step in and persuade John Deere to reconsider the move. This illustrates how vulnerable local economies can be when faced with global corporate decisions. However, this is just the start of a much bigger issue, the American manufacturing exodus, and this is where things start to get interesting. John Deere is not the first company to contemplate relocating overseas, and it will not be the last. The move by John Deere is part of a larger trend that has been changing American manufacturing for decades. Businesses in a variety of industries have been shifting operations to nations with lower labor costs, lower taxes, and fewer regulations. This exodus has displaced many once thriving manufacturing and economic destruction left behind by industrial towns. Giants in industries like textiles and automotive electronics have all taken comparable actions. The reasoning is straightforward. Lower production costs equal higher profit margins. However, these quick wins frequently come at a long-term cost, as companies that relocate their operations abroad run the risk of losing the support of American customers and facing political backlash, as evidenced by Trump's assertive posture. Meanwhile, other nations are taking advantage of this change, especially those in Asia and Latin America, by providing incentives like infrastructure and tax breaks. Investments to draw in foreign producers for these countries' hospitable businesses. Some experts contend that reversing this trend calls for more than just punitive tariffs. They suggest that the U.S. needs to invest in workforce development, modernize infrastructure, and provide incentives for companies to stay. Companies like John Deere boost their economies and create jobs, but for the U.S., the trend raises serious concerns about national competitiveness and economic security. But in a divided political environment, accomplishing this degree of reform is easier said than done. This underscores a developing trend that jeopardizes our manufacturing industry's future. More than just a tariff, Trump's response to this trend is a component of a broader political plan. Trump's signature tool: tariffs. Most people are unaware of how influential tariffs can be in determining economic policy. One of the hallmarks of Donald Trump's political career has been his use of tariffs, which have included tariffs on European goods and trade wars with China. In this most recent dispute with John Deere, he has continuously presented these actions as a means of defending American industries and jobs. Trump's threat of tariffs is a component of a larger plan to deter. The idea behind tariffs is fairly simple. By raising the price of imported goods, tariffs encourage businesses to produce domestically. However, in practice, more complex industries that depend on global supply chains may experience higher costs for both raw materials and completed goods. Tariffs, according to critics, are a two-edged sword that, while they may save some jobs, can also increase consumer prices and lead to trade partners taking retaliatory action during his presidency. Trump levied taxes on aluminum and steel. While these tariffs did temporarily increase employment in certain industries, they also increased costs for those that rely on metal supplies, like the construction and automotive sectors, despite importers' claims that the action would revitalize American manufacturing. While Trump's detractors claim that these actions hurt us, his supporters insist that they sent a clear message to foreign rivals. Long-term competitiveness with his most recent challenge to John Deere Trump is reaffirming his belief that tariffs are an essential tool to fight outsourcing by adopting such a public stance, in an attempt to persuade other businesses to maintain jobs on American soil. This highlights how tariffs are both an economic weapon and a political statement. But how do they actually affect the industries they are meant to protect? Imagine paying more for everyday goods because of a hidden tax. When tariffs are introduced, they are frequently portrayed as a way to protect jobs. However, the effects can ripple throughout the economy in ways that are not immediately apparent. For instance, if a tariff raises the price of imported steel, a company that manufactures farm equipment may have to raise prices on their products to maintain profitability. For farmers purchasing machinery, this could lead to higher prices for equipment they need to remain competitive. The problem is not just increased equipment costs. Tariffs may also cause supply chain interruptions. In certain situations, businesses may experience sourcing challenges. Delays in obtaining essential components can cause production to slow, which will reduce efficiency and result in lost revenue if trade tensions worsen. Additionally, U.S. exports may be harmed by retaliatory tariffs imposed by other nations. Particularly, at risk are agricultural goods. For instance, China imposed tariffs on U.S. soybeans in retaliation for Trump's trade policies. The sharp decline in demand for American farmers' crops serves as a sobering reminder that trade wars frequently result in numerous casualties on both sides. This results in a difficult balancing act between affordability and job protection, but not all industries are equally affected. Farmers are especially at risk, and they face challenges. Farmers work in one of the most unstable industries, and one bad season can spell financial ruin for them. Tariffs on ESS goods, such as machinery, can make their pre-existing problems worse, because the tractors, plows, and harvesters they depend on are already costly. When the cost of these goods increases due to tariffs, farmers must make tough choices about whether to maintain their aging machinery or invest in new equipment. Farming is a very capital-intensive industry, with frequently extremely narrow profit margins. For many, maintaining older machinery is not always a practical option, because rising equipment costs can further reduce those margins. Farms find it more difficult to compete in both domestic and foreign markets when they use outdated equipment because it can be less efficient and result in higher fuel and maintenance costs. Furthermore, a lot of small and medium-sized farms depend on loans to buy new machinery when costs increase. Farmers may find it difficult to obtain financing, and higher interest rates make matters more difficult by forcing many producers into financial difficulties due to the additional tariff burden. Tariffs aren't the only issue farmers face. Some may be forced to reduce operations or risk going out of business completely. As the trade war intensifies and there is worldwide retaliation, things start to get really interesting. Other nations strike back instead of just sitting back. When one nation imposes tariffs on another, other nations frequently retaliate, which can have disastrous effects on American farmers and manufacturers. International trade is a delicate, balancing act. Nations like China that are important trading partners. In response, Mexico and Canada frequently target U.S. exports, especially from a political standpoint. At the height of Trump's trade war with China, sectors like agriculture, farmers growing soybeans in the United States were caught in the crossfire. We were subject to high tariffs from China, soybeans drastically lowering demand. Previously dependent on Chinese markets, farmers were now forced to locate fresh purchasers. Some turned to soiling their crops in the hopes of improved trade conditions. Down the road, if Trump's tariffs on John Deere products take effect, Mexico, a major trading partner for American agricultural products, might also retaliate, which would make matters worse for us farmers who are already struggling with growing expenses and declining profit margins. Experts caution that extended trade wars run the risk of trapping industries in vicious cycles of retaliation with no obvious way out. That although tariffs may be meant to protect domestic industries, these trade disputes have the potential to destabilize entire sectors, resulting in decreased investment and job losses. The overall economic. Sometimes the negative effects outweigh the positive ones, which could result in a protracted trade war with worldwide repercussions. However, there is another war going on in America's fields. The war for labor. Hard work is the cornerstone of American agriculture, but a large portion of that labor comes from an often overlooked source: immigrant laborers. For decades, immigrant laborers have played crucial roles in planting, harvesting, maintaining, and the United States Department of Agriculture reports that over 70% of the nation's agricultural natural labor force is made up of immigrants, many of whom work under seasonal contracts. These workers endure difficult working conditions, frequently for low wages, to ensure that crops are harvested on time. Despite their crucial contributions, these workers face growing obstacles, such as stricter immigration laws and limited access to work permits. The strain is being felt by farm owners as well. In industries like fruit and vegetable farming, where timing is crucial, even a slight delay in labor availability can result in large financial losses, and many farmers are being forced to either reduce production or leave crops unharvested. This demonstrates how labor laws can have a direct effect on the food security of the country. Farmers are currently searching for solutions to deal with this crisis. The growing expense of labor scarcity. Imagine whole fields going unharvested because of a lack of workers. The effects of labor shortages extend beyond delayed harvests. Many farm owners report paying much higher wages to recruit and retain workers, further compressing already slim profit margins. Due to increased demand, the cost of available labor rises. Small and mid-sized farms are especially badly impacted by rising labor costs, in contrast to large corporations that can absorb price increases through economies of scale. Smaller farms frequently have extremely tight budgets, so when wages increase, these farmers may have to make difficult choices. One farmer in the Central Valley of California could either cut back on production or save money on other necessary costs like irrigation and equipment maintenance. To put it simply, the situation is unsustainable because we are bidding against one another for the same limited pool of workers. Some farmers are turning to desperate measures, such as providing bonuses or temporary housing, to entice workers during peak seasons. But these stopgap solutions don't really address the root cause, and the entire supply chain is impacted when farms are unable to meet production goals because of labor shortages. Retailers and distributors might experience price hikes or delays, which are eventually passed on to consumers. This is one of the reasons why food prices have fluctuated recently, especially for labor-intensive crops like leafy greens and berries. This results in a risky feedback loop where consumers pay more and farms become less profitable. But technology might provide some hope. With labor shortages reaching critical levels, many farmers are looking to automation as a potential solution. What if robots could save American farms? Technological developments in agriculture have enabled task automation that previously relied solely on human labor, such as robotic harvesters and self-driving tractors. The creation of robotic fruit-picking machines is one prominent example of how innovation is changing how farms run. Traditionally, a skilled hand was needed to harvest delicate fruits like apples and strawberries to prevent bruising or damage to the produce. However, recent technological advancements have allowed machines to perform these tasks with greater precision. Farmers who have implemented these systems report increased productivity and a decreased reliance on seasonal labor. Automation also extends to planting and irrigation, in order to ensure that crops receive the proper amount of water, nutrients, and sunlight. Precision agriculture tools use sensors and artificial intelligence to optimize resource allocation. These technologies not only minimize waste and maximize yield, but they also reduce labor requirements. However, automation is not without its difficulties. The upfront costs of buying and maintaining advanced equipment can be prohibitive, especially for smaller farms. Additionally, certain tasks, like crop inspection and livestock care, still require human oversight, and there is a chance that an over-reliance on automation could result in farm workers losing their jobs, who rely on jobs in agriculture. Despite these obstacles, a number of experts think that as technology advances, automation will be essential to farming in the future. Here's where it gets really interesting. Lawmakers are stepping in with bold ideas, realizing the severity of the labor crisis in agriculture. A number of policymakers have proposed reforms aimed at stabilizing the workforce. Farmers may find new ways to balance innovation with labor needs, which could revolutionize farming but comes with its own set of challenges. However, technology alone isn't enough. Policy reform is urgently needed. Policy reforms for a new era. This circumstance disadvantages our agriculture on the international scene, particularly when it comes to exporting. One potential solution to these trade disputes is bilateral agreements, but these talks are drawn out and politically charged. In the meantime, manufacturers and farmers are looking for ways to diversify their markets in order to lessen their reliance on any one trading partner. There is hope that new export partnerships in Southeast Asia and Africa will lessen the likelihood of retaliatory tariffs, which could permanently change America's place in the world economy. However, tariffs are only one factor in the equation. Farm dynamics are also changing, which raises serious questions about the future of farm diversity and food security. However, innovation may provide a path forward for the development of sustainable farming. What if farms could respond to environmental and economic challenges by being both profitable and sustainable? Crop rotation, cover crops, and regenerative agriculture, which aims to restore soil health and biodiversity, are among the sustainable practices that many farmers are implementing to increase productivity while using fewer resources. Farmers want to build robust ecosystems that can resist changes in the climate and pressures from the market. Another important factor in this change is technology. Innovations such as precision farming, which optimizes planting and irrigation using GPS, and data analytics, assisting farmers in reducing expenses and increasing yields. In order to lessen reliance on fossil fuels, farms are also integrating renewable energy sources like solar panels and biogas systems. Demand for food produced sustainably is being driven by consumers, opening up new avenues for farmers to differentiate their goods. Organic and regenerative farming certifications are becoming more popular. Growth in both local and foreign markets as more customers place a higher value on sustainable farmers. Those who make investments in these strategies can take advantage of new revenue streams and premium pricing. However, there are some difficulties in making the switch to sustainable farming. The initial cost of adopting new technologies and practices can be high, but government programs providing financial incentives and technical support are crucial to assisting farmers in making the transition. This could establish American agriculture as a leader in global sustainability initiatives. But in the end, leadership will decide whether these changes are successful. In times of change, the decisions made today will have a significant impact on how American farming develops in the future. The challenge facing policymakers in the agricultural and manufacturing sectors going forward is striking a balance between immediate economic demands and long-term sustainability objectives. Otherwise, the current trends of labor shortages, tariff disputes, and farm consolidation may become irreversible. Proposals to increase assistance for small farms are part of the comprehensive agricultural reform being discussed by federal leaders. Strengthen labor laws and make infrastructure investments in order to stabilize export markets and lower the possibility of retaliatory tariffs. Some lawmakers are also advocating for stronger trade agreements, but political impasse continues to be a significant barrier for corporate leadership in the agricultural sector is also very important. Businesses like John Deere and others have the ability to spur innovation by partnering with farmers and research institutions, investing in new technologies, and addressing issues like labor shortages and climate resilience. Farmers who feel left behind by current policies are having their voices heard by grassroots organizations and advocacy groups. These groups are demanding more transparency in supply chains, more equitable pricing structures, and more representation in policy discussions. Their work is essential to ensuring that small and mid-sized farms' needs are not disregarded. Ultimately, stakeholder cooperation is what makes these initiatives successful. Each level, farmers and policymakers, building a more resilient and equitable agricultural system requires collaboration between consumers and corporate leaders. This is a critical juncture that could shape America's economic future for future generations. The history of American agriculture and trade is still being written, and your opinion counts. What do you think of the tactics we've covered? Will These audacious actions preserve American jobs, or will they make things harder for farmers and manufacturers? Please share your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth discussions of the topics influencing our world.